Every Jewish festival has its special story. For example, if I say the word Pesach, you'll talk about Exodus from Egypt. If I talk about Purim, you'll say Megillat Esther. When we talk about Tisha Bav, people will say Kamtza Bar Kamtza. Who were Kamtza and Bar Kamtza? The Talmud records of the following story in the tractate of Gittin 55 and 56. There was a man who had wanted to hold a party. He had a best friend named Kamtza and his worst enemy called Bar Kamtza. A message was sent to invite his friend to the party. And lo and behold, the messenger gets the invitation mixed up and invites Bar Kamtza instead of Kamtza. Bar Kamtza arrives at the party. It is filled with the who's who of Jerusalem. The music's playing, the food is there. Bar Kamtza walks in the party. The host looks up and in shock starts screaming at Bar Kamtza, "Get out! I don't want you here at my party." Bar Kamtza says, "But I got an invitation." The host said, "This was a mistake. Get out. You're not invited." Bar Kamtza says to him, "Please don't embarrass me. Please don't embarrass me. I'll pay for my meal. Get out. I'll pay for half the meal. Please don't get me out. Get out. Please. I'll pay for the entire meal. Just don't embarrass me. Get out." And with that, the host throws Bar Kamtza out of the party. Bar Kamtza picks himself up and says, "No one stood up for me. No one was willing to defend my honor. I'm going to get them back." He travels to Rome and he tells the Caesar that the Jews are rebelling. Caesar says, "I don't see any rebellion." Bar Kamtza says, "I'll tell you what you do. Give me an animal. I'll bring it to the temple. If they slaughter the animal, it proves that the Jews are not rebelling. If they don't, then it's a sign that Jews are rebelling." Bar Kamtza arrives at the gates of Yerushalayim, and just before he enters the Temple Mount, he nicks the lip of the beast, or blinds it in the eye, something that the Romans wouldn't have viewed as a blemish, but in the eyes of the Torah is a serious problem. The question was what to do with the sacrifice. The Kohanim wished to offer the sacrifice. Up jumps Rav Zachariah ben Akulas and says, "You can't do that. People will say that you can offer blemish sacrifices on the altar." So they decided, well, let's just knock off Bar Kamtza. Says Rav Zachariah, "You can't do that either. People will say if you bring a blemished animal to the temple, you get the death penalty." They do nothing. They don't offer the sacrifice. The Romans come, the temple is destroyed. So the question is, who's the bad person in the story? The Talmud opened up with the words, because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, the temple was destroyed. What did Kamtza do? He wasn't even invited to the party. Maybe it was Bar Kamtza and his anger towards the host and the Jewish people. Maybe it was the host himself for his hatred towards Bar Kamtza. Maybe it was the sages and the people that were there who did nothing when a man was being humiliated. Or maybe it was Rav Zachariah ben Avkulas. The Talmud says, when they apportion the blame, they said Rav Zachariah is to blame. And the question is, what did Rav Zachariah do that was so bad? So the two questions we have to answer up is, number one, who's to blame? And number two, why of all the characters in the story does the Talmud seem to place the blame on Rav Zachariah? The answer to the story, we'll answer question number two first. There's an important halacha in Jewish law that says like this: when it comes to laws in the Jewish courts of the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court that used to reside in Jerusalem, in cases of monetary disputes, the most important voice spoke first, and then if people wished to contradict them, they spoke after. In case of capital crimes, the rule was that the smallest judge would speak first, and then the greatest authority would speak at the end. Says Rabbi Yochanan, because of the humility of Rav Zachariah ben Avkulas, the temple was destroyed. But when I read the story, I notice that Rav Zachariah is the one who speaks first, symbolizing that he is the smallest of the sages. When you read the text, Ken, Rabbi Yochanan says, because of the humility of Rav Zachariah. Rav Zachariah was the Gadol Hador, the greatest rabbi of that generation. And when he says to him, "You know what? I'm going to show how small I am. I'm a humble guy. I'm a modest guy. I'm going to speak first to show that I'm the smallest of the authorities in this capital case." But everyone else, all the other rabbis said, "Whoa, if Rav Zachariah has spoken, who are we to disagree?" And no one disagrees. Rav Zachariah broke protocol. Instead of speaking last, spoke first. And no one dared to speak after him. So because of Rav Zachariah and his modesty and his breaking of the protocols of the Sanhedrin, says Rabbi Yochanan, he's to blame. The Maharal of Prague offers the following explanation. He says, you know who's to blame? Everyone's to blame. And the reason why they are to blame is they all suffer from the same problem. And that is, not one of them saw the results of their actions. If you had gone to the host and said, do you realize that your actions at this party are going to destroy the temple? He would have thrown his hands up and said, I would never believe that, I would never have done that had I known that the end result would be destruction of the temple. If you'd gone to Bar Kamtza and said to him, do you know that because of your action the temple would be destroyed? Bar Kamtza would throw in his hands and said, me, I was angry, of course I was angry, but I would never have destroyed the temple. I didn't want to destroy the temple. And he spoke to the sages who were sitting there quietly, and he said to them, because of you guys. They said, no, I put my hands up, not me, not me. Every single person in the story was guilty of not seeing the consequences of their action or inaction. What about Kamtza? What did Kamtza do? According to Talmud, it's because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza the temple was destroyed. Well, the word Kamtza is the way it means a clenched fist. Komets was a way that if you take a measure of flour in the days of the temple. So a Kamtza and a Bar Kamtza were two fists banging at each other, fighting each other. Two people having an argument. And because of this argument, things were set in motion that led to the destruction of the temple. At every stage of the way, had someone put their hands up and said, wait a second, we're going too far. There are terrible consequences from these actions. Who knows? The temple may never have been destroyed. And thus when the rabbis look at the story of Tisha Bav, they say to us, be very careful with when you do an action. What are going to be the consequences? Some of them are foreseen, some of them are unforeseen. Tisha Bav is a night of crying. It's a day to mourn the destruction and reflect upon the tragedies that befallen the Jewish people. Our sages say to us, don't look at the events themselves, look at the messages and the lessons that we can learn from them. Of course, we mourn the destruction of the temple and the years of exile and the subsequent tragedies that befell our people. But we have to have a take-home message. The take-home message has to be the Kamtza Bar Kamtza story. When one person has a fist, a komets, and another person has a fist, another komets, and they start battling each other, and they can't seem to find a common ground, and people are starting to pick sides, Bar Kamtza and Kamtza, it ultimately is going to cause a collapse of society and a destruction. And when we take a step back and look at it, we said, no ways that we didn't intend that. Those are the consequences for our actions. So when we see fighting, when we see arguments, when we see people, and we say we are bystanders, and we don't intercede and stop the violence, and we pick sides, and we just dispute the other side, and we turn our backs when the arguments are happening, and we turn our back on people on there who are there, who are in need. This is the roots of the destruction as described in the Kamtza Bar Kamtza story. So whether it is a haughtiness coming through piety, or it is two people fighting, a Kamtza and a Bar Kamtza, whether it is people picking sides and humiliating another person, when it's a person seeking revenge, we need to be very careful and reflect upon the damage that can be caused, that is about to transpire. Tisha Bav, we mourn for 2,000 years. And one of the things we're mourning for is, of course, the destruction of the temple, caused by sinat chinam, a hatred for the other. And when you try analyze and say, what is it that you hated about him so much? It's chinam. I can't really think of a reason. It's empty. There's nothing there. But it's a hatred. And thus, when we sit on the morning, when we sit and mourn on Tisha Bav, let the story of Bar Kamtza and Kamtza be front and center. As we unpack the story, whether we're reading it as a young child or as an adult, the messages are there for eternity. Because of the Kamtza and the Bar Kamtza, the temple was destroyed. How many lives, how many communities, how many families are destroyed because of a Kamtza, a clenched fist, and another clenched fist. In order to make peace, a fist has to open, another fist has to open, so we can have our hands coming together in peace and brotherhood. May the Kamtzas in our lives end, and let us pray for Shalom.